Hi, Julie.
Hi, Rhonda. Rhonda and I are starting our podcast and making determinations about whether we want to present our credentials. I argue in favor because I believe that it gives a level of credibility if you have some very structured education under your belt. My training is that of I'm an MD with specialization in psychiatry and over 20 years of experience in treating severe mental illness and even the worried well and chemical dependency treatment.
And I'm not really sure how I feel about saying what my credentials are because, I am a psychologist, a clinical psychologist. And I work with children in foster care mostly. I have a small private practice on the side. I've probably evaluated over 10,000 children in foster care. I'm coming to this podcast as Rhonda. I am coming with the experience of my work, but I don't want to represent the field of psychology or other psychologists. I just want to talk about my own personal experiences, not necessarily my professional experiences. And I'm not exactly clear about the ethics of coming to a podcast as a psychologist because people may think I'm representing the field of psychology.
I think it's also important to understand that we're not giving advice. We're talking very personally, both of us, about our personal struggles and our adventures in trying to attain higher levels of recovery for ourselves. I feel that the thing that, from my part, the podcast is, I feel I'm almost beginning a course of recovery, a different kind of course of recovery than I have had all my life from my own trauma. When I was a child, I was in the room as my sister was being assaulted on a regular basis. And I didn't even come to realize what had been transpiring until I was in my 40s when she started having flashbacks. Because in our home, punishment was just a regular thing, and we never really knew what we were being punished for. So I just figured she was being punished for something she did wrong. It was hard always to know what we had done wrong or to make sense of it. I would say that my father was not only severely alcoholic, but also severely narcissistic, and I would say sociopathic, and enjoyed abusing. So that was my background, and I in every step I made in my life, I was really trying to avoid replicating my childhood dysfunction. I didn't drink at all because everybody around me was alcoholic. I tried to protect my family. I married someone who I thought was the antithesis of my father because he was very soft-spoken. But my own attitudes, my own behaviors predisposed to very much of my trauma being replicated over and over throughout my life. And my attitude toward it until I came into a 12-step recovery program was that I was the hapless victim of all of this. I didn't realize the choices and attitudes that I had that were predisposing to perpetuating trauma in my life and in that of my children. Everything came to a head long after I had lost any desire to live. So I started in recovery in a place of, in a very, very dark place where all hope was lost. And I'm trying to find, I am not trying to, I am actually finding my way out of that and recovering. But I'm still early in my recovery, and my hope is that we in this podcast can not show other people how to recover, but maybe even show our own paths to recovery.
I just have to say, wow. I didn't know that about you. And thank you for being so honest with me and with whoever's listening to this podcast. I agree with you about all of those things. Number one is that I don't want to come from a place of advice. I want to also share my experience, strength, and hope about my own personal traumas. While I'm continuing on my path of a better life, being able to share that experience with others, but also, I guess, include my professional experiences as a almost like a outside voice to talk about, to give me the words to talk about the recovery I'm experiencing and my better quality of life. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I went into psychiatry in a way. One of the things that I felt was that psychological suffering is the greatest suffering, as great or greater than any physical pain. I envisioned myself somehow as a healer, but I think I was also stimulated by the desire to understand my father and to cure him. So the idea of curing was very important, and it was my life's mission to cure everything and everyone around me. So that didn't work out too well, and as it usually doesn't. It worked out great for my patients, because with medication management, you really do get transformations of people's well-being. Somebody who comes in having been depressed for 50 years can get on the right medication and experience their first memory of not being depressed. Or I had somebody who was bipolar who started on lithium and said, I feel like myself, but without the illness. This is the most myself that I've ever felt, and the most well I've ever felt. So medication has that capacity. For me, it was not the solution. It often isn't in post-traumatic stress disorder. There's something else, but there are aspects of post-traumatic stress disorder that can creep up on people and harm them later. And as I look at my own path to recovery, I think of some of these beautiful people who have experienced trauma and worked through the justice system to get justice, and themselves have ended up taking their own lives. And so getting justice doesn't seem to be the way to healing, personal healing. I think Rhonda and I are exploring more than anything else, not what constitutes trauma, not how bad things can get. I always loved to go on about how bad things were. My husband strangling me, other kinds of things. But how bad things were is not what we're here to discuss. It's really how to get from the place of post-traumatic stress disorder or experience of trauma to a place of joyful waking up in the morning, enthusiasm about life, and enthusiasm for the adventure that we get to take every day. And in the context of trauma is a real thing that becomes physiologically ingrained. And in the context of that, how do we find the path out, the ladder from the pit up to the surface. I think Rhonda and I are both on paths of discovery and want to share our own personal pathways out.
Completely. And on my way down to Santa Fe this afternoon to meet with you, I was listening to Steve Jobs' commencement speech to help inspire me for this podcast. He talked about the trauma of getting fired from Apple. At first, he was kind of disoriented and confused about where his path was going to go. And then he remembered that he still loved what he did. After that, he was able to find his path. He got focused in on his love energy and connected with reality, that his world hadn't really changed that much because he still had passion for the things that he loved, and he started 2 new companies and eventually reconnected with Apple. But he talked about what he said was that when life hits you with a brick, if you have faith, it'll still work out. And he also talked about the importance of doing what you love. And I think that having faith, having hope is an excellent way to help draw you out of the darkness of trauma and the impact that it's having on you. Especially like when you are feeling suicidal or that you don't even feel like living anymore, hopeless and helpless, that the smallest drop of hope and love can open a huge door to recovery for you and help bring joy back into your life.
When I entered into recovery, I didn't have hope. I had long given up on hope. I hoped for my kids that things would be okay, but I had given up on hope for myself, having joy. And as I started to recover, and my friends from when I was younger didn't recognize me because I had lost my sense of humor, I had lost my smile. I actually even looked different. But as I started to recover, I started to laugh again. I started to find things funny again. I started coming out of my depression. I started being able to sleep. It wasn't the hope that I had like Steve Jobs had hope. I just had the support of people who said that there was hope. That support was a lot of what helped me take the first steps to actually improving my situation. And it's funny, like Steve Jobs, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. Well, I knew what I wanted to do, and the training in medicine is long, and there's a lot of it that's a means to an end, and you work knowing exactly what you want to do, and then you do it, and I did it for 20 years. But now I know I don't want to do that anymore. The reason I don't want to do it is because I've been a person who's always sought to solve everybody else's problems and never really figured out who I was, other than in my capacity to fix everybody else. And my fixing everybody else did not work in my family. It did work with my patients, but I no longer want to be the person who people come to with their gravest sadness and horror and terror and illness and asking for solutions. And the reason I don't want to do that is very selfish. I want to become strong and whole again within myself. I don't feel that that's the best way. But also, I want to just do a lot of joyful things and to focus on that for another portion of my life. There was a point when I left psychiatry and I said, I've paid my dues. If I had dues to pay, I've paid them. That wasn't why I was doing it. I wasn't doing it to pay my dues. But there was a part of me that felt guilty with the tool set that I had to not be using it to help other people. It felt like a squandering and a violation of my role to not just continue doing psychiatry. But a part of me is trying to feel through the darkness to where I want to put my energy. I'm in the process of selling my home, and my last of 4 children is leaving the home, and I have new adventures await me, and I want to see what those are. And they're not the same adventures I've already had. There's something different, and I want to see what it is.
That is so exciting.
It is exciting.
I love thinking about those things. When I what brought me to Al-Anon recovery and therapy was I was getting out of an alcoholic marriage, which, I have a long history of trauma, but the most recent trauma that led to my recovery was getting out of an alcoholic marriage. And similarly, I was very hopeless. And I remember when I first started going to Al-Anon meetings, I couldn't even speak. I just would cry. I'd start trying to talk and I'd just cry. And, maybe I was the only newcomer at the meeting, but I would see other people were very composed and that they were laughing and had joy in their lives. It took me a while, but after a while, I would come to meetings and I was laughing and I had joy in my life, and I wasn't exactly sure how the whole process was working, but that it was working. And now I have a lot of joy in my life, and I continue to go to Al-Anon. I also go to regular therapy, which is really helpful. And I still have my practice. And I still really enjoy my practice. Like, it's amazing because I just do psychological evaluations on children. And I've probably seen over 10,000 kids in foster care. And I don't get bored. It's like, I don't understand how I don't get bored, but I really like what I do. So that part is good. But I will say along those lines of what you're saying about helping people and fixing things, because you had more of I'm more of a diagnostician. I do make treatment recommendations. You were actually curing people. I know that when I was going to when I go to therapy, I, talk with my therapist about my work and about my problems, etc. And, we've had a lot of dialogues about being careful about not being a wounded caregiver. And, because a lot of the children that I see are coming from the family disease of addiction. Their whole lives have revolved around addiction. That was similar to me. And, you have to be really careful about, I've learned over time, and I'm still not perfect at it. I try to manage it, but, coming from caregiving from that wounded place, because it is not that fulfilling doing that.
In my practice, I felt I would often come to work and my patients would be better than I was. I'd say it's a good work day when you see 30 clients and they're all doing better than you are. In medication management, it's very different. It's an analytical skill. It's a perceptive skill, and there didn't necessarily involve any sharing of my own experience. In fact, there wasn't. My clients had no idea that I was a trauma survivor, or at least I hope they didn't. If they did, it was because my trauma was showing. It wasn't because I shared it with them. But I think I went into my work with a coat of armor. I had a very well-honed capacity for dissociation.
Oh, me too. Excellent. That's a very good skill of mine.
Yeah. So I had my coat of armor that protected me, and I could treat them. It's almost like if you're treating somebody with COVID and you go in with your suit on and you can be pretty confident you're not going to contract COVID from them. And it was my dissociation was a wonderful inoculation from the trauma that other people had, which I think did affect a lot of my colleagues, even more than it affected me. The thing is that in my own recovery, and early in my going into the 12 steps, into the rooms of 12-step recovery, I actually came into my body. I remember feeling, I clacked my teeth together and I felt like I have teeth. I started to inhabit my own body and to be aware of my own body and to not be as dissociative. So I no longer have the coat of armor, and I'm not in a place in my recovery where I feel that it would be appropriate for me to treat people. Of course, when people have problems and so-and-so tells me about her, son's symptoms, I can't help ask a bunch of questions, give a bunch of questions to ask, and advise that they talk with their psychiatrist about whether it may be bipolar instead of depression or that kind of thing. I was a very good, very analytical, very, very by the book diagnostician and prescriber. And I didn't do much psychotherapy. I wasn't trained much in psychotherapy, and there wasn't as much of a need in my community. There was an 8-month wait list for psychiatric care, and there wasn't the same kind of wait for therapy. So my patients all had their own therapists, and they had their own primary care doctors, and those are the people who would refer people to me. But now that I'm not so dissociative, it's not a good time for me to go back. When I was in psychiatry, I loved it. I think in psychiatry, you see more cure and recovery than you do in general medicine. People generally get well. If you're not getting well, I always told my patients, the proof is in the pudding. If you're getting worse or you're not getting well, seek a second opinion. If you've gone 6 months and you're not improving, seek a second opinion.
I want to come back to this dissociation topic because I just think it's so interesting, because even I'm seeing all these children who are severely traumatized through my work, my own personal work, through Al-Anon and in the rooms of Al-Anon, hearing people shares and stuff. It's so interesting because I now, when I'm interviewing, I ask about proprioceptive awareness, like people, like children, like, are they clumsy? Are they running into walls? Are they, because they are so dissociated. Kids are can get so dissociated, and they become they learn how to dissociate at a very early age, but they're not present, so they're clumsy, they're falling, they're moving their arms in awkward ways. And so that is one of the ways, when I'm looking at post-traumatic stress disorder in children, one of the things I'm looking at, like, are people complaining that this child is so clumsy? I just think it's so interesting how dissociation impacts all of us, who have a history of trauma, and it develops from probably pre-verbal years, if a child's being raised in a violent, chaotic, neglectful home, that one way to survive is to dissociate. While it is an effective survival mechanism for a child and for young adults and adults, it becomes, it no longer serves us as we age and we start entering into recovery and trying to live a better quality life. And it is much like, for myself, becoming more present. Even though it's hard, it's much more rewarding, like walking the walk, being accountable, checking in, being present for the people in your life that you love. Like my current partner, I still have a tendency to check out sometimes, but I really try to be present. And this is just a small digression, but recently my mom died, and I had a lot of trauma around my mom. It was extremely difficult for me to be present with her. When I first walked into Al-Anon, my mom was already aging, and I was hoping that I would come to a place of peace with her. And as she died, I was able to be present for her, to be emotionally present during the very difficult process of transitioning. And I'm so thankful that I got that tool and that ability to be available during that time with my mom. And it was just amazing. And so, recovery is an awesome thing. And it can give you the tools to have such a better quality of life and to be present.
Yeah, it's the path to recovery is not an easy one. So as I became more present in my body, I also had some experiences since I've been in recovery. I've had the 2 worst panic attacks I've ever had in my life. I don't think I had ever really had a panic attack. I'd handled all kinds of things. I mean, people bleeding and horrible situations. And I just had handled them with a level of dissociation that was just so handy to be able to use at any difficult time. Twice since I've been in recovery, I've just had flat out panic attacks. And to actually be in my body when I'm feeling fear is something that's new to me. Consequently, it has been very, very painful to be in a panic attack. I'm brave and I soldier on.
What happened? Like what did you experience?
What happened was there was a medical scare with a daughter of mine who has had serious medical issues in the past. Severe pneumonia one time, meningitis another time, a variety of things, and ultimately ended up with an illness that had her bedridden for about 5 years. She's better now. Shockingly, I never thought she'd get better, and I don't think she did. I think she had come to terms with being disabled at a certain point. But she's a brilliant person, and she and I together, but mostly led by her, found a way out of the illness and recovered. And part of it was time. Part of it was she was youthful and robust when the illness hit. It began with a severe 105-degree fever and nobody really knowing what was going on. And the illness just didn't go away. I mean, she was somebody who would run 13 miles just for fun. And she got to the point that she could barely stand for about 5 years. More than 5 years. She didn't matriculate in school after 8th grade until she ended up at an Ivy League school fairly recently and graduated with honors. I'm very proud of her path. A situation that seemed hopeless, she turned around. Anyway, there was a medical scare with her, and I think it brought back some of the old fears. And my experience of panic was nausea, shaking, just feeling like my body was weak, almost like I had been exsanguinated. The blood drained out of me for a period of time, but then just like overcome with extreme nervous energy. And a very sweet girl. She's kind of like almost like a daughter to me. In that I didn't give birth to her, but she's like a daughter to me. I called her and she came over and we ended up going out in the rain and she sat beside me as I lay there in the rain shivering and was just patient with me.
Did you know you were having a panic attack?
At first I thought I was really ill and needed to go to the hospital, but as it went on, it became obvious that it wasn't illness. But sitting out in the rain really helped. I think, again, bringing me back into my body, but bringing me into my body with the experience of the rain falling on me, on my face, on my body, being outside with the cooler air and the night sky. And it just took me back to a place of being calm again. And also a loved one by my side. That made a huge difference, too.
That is a beautiful story.